Hey y'all, it's Victoria here, and welcome to Voice of Adventure, where we enjoy all things related to music, theater, travel, and more. Today we're going to take a journey way back to the beginnings of theater. There are so many important and influential people in the history of theater, but one of the most important, before 1800, is Dionysus, the god of theater. He's also the god of wine, but that's a story for another day. We're going to dive deep into Dionysus's influence on theater and how the art form has evolved over time, specifically into the realm of musical theater. The creation and production of what's considered to be the first musical, the Beggars Opera, was a major event in history, which altered the course of theater forever. It's the reason we've had so many amazing musicals at our disposal today, from shows like The Sound of Music, to Legally Blonde, to Hamilton, you name it. Musical theater is my deepest passion in life, and I'm so excited to take this journey through time. Let's get started. As we travel across the stars back through time, we're going to find ourselves at the first stop on our journey, ancient Greece. I hope you're ready for some Greek mythology, because we're diving headfirst into the craziness. So, we know that Dionysus is the god of theater, but where did he come from? What's his origin story? Well, the truth is, there are multiple different origin stories for Dionysus, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll go with the most common. We start our journey taking a look at the lives of Zeus and Semele, also known as God and Mortal, or father and mother to Dionysus. After Semele became pregnant with Dionysus, a goddess by the name of Hera grew very jealous. Along the line, Hera deceived Semele into forcing Zeus to show her his true form. Now, there are a few reasons why this situation is a bit complicated. First of all, the goddess Hera happens to be Zeus's sister, and his wife. Say hello to our original Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones if she had actually married Jaime, everybody. Anyway, this means Zeus's relationship with Semele was an affair, and that's where the jealousy comes in. You might ask, well, what's the big issue with Zeus showing Semele his true form? Well, the big issue is that Zeus's true form is essentially a lot of lightning and fire. Semele made Zeus promise to grant her any wish she desired, so he was forced to show her his true form when she asked. It ended up being too much for her as a human, and the fire and lightning consumed her, killing her. Thankfully, Zeus was able to save Dionysus. We know situations with the Greek gods aren't always the most traditional to us mortals, and Dionysus's birth is no different. According to GreeksandGoddesses.net, Zeus literally sewed Dionysus into his own thigh, and he was born several months later. Don't ask me how it works. I couldn't tell you. These are gods we're talking about. Anyway, thank you, Zeus, for saving the god of theater. Zeus made sure that Dionysus spent his childhood being raised by rain nymphs, where Hera would never be able to find him. This kept him safe from any kind of jealous revenge. As he grew older, Dionysus learned how to make wine from grapes, and wound up spreading that knowledge to others throughout the continent of Asia. Eventually, he became one of the 12 Olympians as he made his way to Mount Olympus. Wow, what an origin story. As fond as I am of stories of Zeus and other gods and goddesses, let's move on to the reason we're here. Dionysus as the god of theater. Dionysus is one of the most important people, or rather gods, in the history of theater, especially before the year 1800. He should be taught in every theater history class because of his influence to theater as a whole, certain festivals and cultures, and his importance to Greek theater. Various sources, including Study.com, explain that Dionysus is closely associated with characteristics such as feasting, jubilation, and revelry. In other words, he loved to party. He was all about freeing the senses and living for joy. I find this super interesting because freeing the senses and transporting oneself to another world is what theater is all about as an audience member. Also, I relate to Dionysus because I too love feasting, jubilation, and a bit of revelry. In ancient Greece, while everyone didn't agree with what he stood for, a lot of people related to Dionysus and had a great amount of respect for him and the joyous ideas and lifestyles he encouraged. He was notorious for liberating people of, quote, self-consciousness and the restraints of society, unquote, as confirmed by GreeksandGoddesses.net. There were several different festivals of grandeur celebrated in honor of him. This takes us on our next stop on this journey through the stars to ancient Athens. Whoa, that was a quick trip. The biggest major festival celebrating Dionysus was called the City Dionysia. City Dionysia was such a big festival with so many activities that it was celebrated for over a week. 8 to 9 days to be exact. Throughout these 8 to 9 days, people would compete against each other, performing different plays, including 3 tragedies and 1 satyr play per entry. Satyr plays are farcical, comedic plays which feature creatures played by actors, which are half human and half horse, or in some iterations, half goat. They're similar to centaurs, except they walk upright on 2 legs, and the actors run around stage wearing fake phalluses. If you don't know what a phallus is, I'll leave it to you to Google it. Moving on. Another major part of the City Dionysia festival was the sacrificing of animals, mainly goats, in honor of Dionysus. Dionysus was heavily associated with goats, and a real goat is actually what was given as the first place prize for the winning playwright of the play competition. In 5th century Athens, there was even a major theater constructed in honor of Dionysus, called the Theater of Dionysus. Many plays were performed in this grand theater in the name of Dionysus. A statue was even erected of Dionysus and placed in the audience, as people thought this would allow him to watch performances and sacrifices made to honor him. This theater still stands and is still in use today. After all these years, visitors are still able to go and see this great theater up close. Clearly, he made his mark on the world. There have been plays dedicated to Dionysus written before 1800, some of which even feature him as a character. 2 in particular are the Bacchae and a play called Frogs. The Bacchae is particularly interesting to me because the Romans called Dionysus Bacchus. The Bacchae were a group of women who worshipped Dionysus, so it's clear to see where the name comes from. Looping back around to my main point, Dionysus is incredibly important and influential in the world of theater. He should be taught about in every theater history class. His influence is still seen today, not just in physical places like the Theater of Dionysus, but also in festivals taking place around the world. Next time you think about the Feast of Fools in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where everything is topsy-turvy and in a great celebration where the rich and poor and the men and women and master and servant switch places for a day, think about the influence Dionysus had on it. And think the same the next time you go to a Mardi Gras celebration or see the decorations in a store. Last year, I went to Universal Studios Orlando's celebration of Mardi Gras and enjoyed their large parade. One of their beautiful floats was called Crew of Dionysus, crew spelled with a K. This was such a nice touch to the parade, and seeing it with a bit of background knowledge of Dionysus made me feel so happy. I'd like to think it's the type of joy Dionysus wanted to instill in his followers. Even though we might not always recognize his influence on theater culture and yearly festivities, it's still important. Everyone studying the history of theater deserves to know his name and impact on the art we all love so deeply. Thanks for joining me on our journey to ancient Greece. Now, It's time to fast forward several hundred years into the future. Woo! What a ride! After traveling across time through the stars once more, we find ourselves in London, England, in the year 1728, the same year composer John Gay published and produced the first performance of the Beggars Opera. The creation of the Beggars Opera was a major event from theater history before the year 1800, which altered the course of the art form. Previously, there had been works of art which incorporated singing and dancing into their productions. But the Beggars Opera is widely regarded as the world's first musical, combining singing, dancing, and spoken word drama, according to the British Library. Part of what made the Beggars Opera so special is how unique it was in nature. John Gay truly brought something new to the stage, which was a smash hit amongst audiences. Endangered Productions points out that it's often called, quote, one of the most genuinely original works in theater history. By the name of the show, one might think it's a true opera. This is not quite the case. The Beggars Opera's genre is called a ballad opera, and it was the first of its kind. Ballad operas were known for being satirical in nature, poking fun at concepts and situations. And that was exactly what John Gay's goal was. Specifically, he wanted to make fun of his good friend, George Frederick Handel, and his Italian operas. He even used some of his music in the Beggars Opera and put it to different lyrics. But even further than taking a jab at his friends, John Gay also took aim at the British government. At the time, there was a not-so-great situation with the first Prime Minister in Britain, Sir Robert Walpole. He was notoriously a corrupt leader and had been accused of being in the wrong with many situations involving money, including bribing others in positions of power. John Gay was not a big fan of him, and he did not hesitate to make his beliefs known in the Beggars Opera, though he did not call out Sir Robert Walpole specifically by name. Instead, he named the character Bob Booty. Yes, you heard that right. Bob Booty. There have been many musicals throughout the years which followed suit to this satirical style of fighting the system or pointing out flaws within a government, person of power, or just a situation in general that they believed to be corrupt at the time. Some examples of this would be The Producers and Urinetown, and there are even hints of it in musicals like Wicked and Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. What is also interesting to me is the use of other composers' music in the Beggars Opera. It's important to note John Gay was not criticizing Italian opera as a whole or as an art form. Simply, the London people's obsession with it. He just didn't quite understand the obsessive appeal. While it's not exactly the same thing in terms of music, we'll get to that later, it can sort of be compared to Disney's Enchanted. Enchanted takes concepts from different fairy tales like Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty. While Enchanted itself is a completely original story, it includes concepts from these fairy tales, such as Giselle falling into a deep sleep after taking a bite of an apple, or Queen Nerissa turning into a giant dragon like Maleficent and climbing the Empire State Building, or the many, many, many Cinderella references with Giselle leaving behind a shoe, having different physical transformations with dresses, and even the character Nancy's last name being Tremaine after Lady Tremaine, the evil stepmother. I'm getting a little off track here. Enchanted is one of my all-time favorite movies. But my point is, the Beggars Opera has had a clear influence on works like Enchanted, with the pulling of different ideas from other works. While it's not a direct correlation in terms of using the same music with different lyrics, Enchanted's music definitely has the same fairy tale feel as the stories it's pulling from, similarly to the Beggars Opera. Now join me as we make our way to the Lincoln's Inn Fields Theater, where the Beggars Opera made its debut performance. hear that? It sounds like the show's getting ready to begin as we hear the orchestra tune up. The music itself is very reminiscent of an Italian opera, as that was a big part of what John Gay was poking fun at. It played out in his favor, as the Beggars Opera ended up being a smash hit. There's one song in the Beggars Opera called Over the Hills and Far Away. Though it's classical in nature, the song itself is not sung by opera singer characters. The characters are beggars, hence the name, the Beggars Opera. The song is a duet between two lovers dreaming about escaping away together. A trained ear can listen to the song and tell that it's being sung in a slightly more musical theater style, as opposed to a strictly classical one. Speaking of plot, you might be curious to know just exactly what the characters in the Beggars Opera are up to. The show follows several prostitutes and robbers. One of the characters, Peachum, is notorious for catching thieves. Peachum, understandably, criticizes their actions. To Mr. and Mrs. Peachum's distress, they find that their daughter Polly has kept a secret from them. She married a horseback riding thief, otherwise known as a highwayman, called McKeith. Mr. and Mrs. Peachum decide it's best if McKeith dies, because then they can claim his fortune. So, they plan to make it happen. But what they don't know is that Polly was prepared and hid him away in a tavern full of pickpocketing women. It sounds to me as if it might have been a sort of brothel. Not the best place to hide, but it worked for a short time. A few of the women ended up being hired by Polly's parents to scoop up McKeith and bring him to Newgate Prison. The plot thickens as we find that McKeith was previously supposed to marry a girl named Lucy, the daughter of Lockett, who's in charge of Newgate Prison. Get it? Lockett. Because it's a prison. I, crack myself up. So anyway, things get sticky for McKeith as Lucy wants to punish him for marrying another woman. Unfortunately, just as Lucy's calmed down, Polly bursts in, claiming that she's married to him. McKeith handles the situation by claiming she's wrong and hysterical, she's a crazy woman. So Lucy sets him free. All Polly and Lucy's parents are concerned about is claiming McKeith's money. So they compromise and decide to split the profits between themselves when he dies, almost as if they're being a bit hypocritical about McKeith's stealing habits. John Gay intentionally pointed out the irony of people criticizing someone for stealing, with having them essentially do the same thing by planning his death just to get away with his money. Anyway, here's where it all gets a little messy. Things never go smoothly for love triangles, and this one is no different. Even though Polly claims she'd like to play nice, Lucy tries to kill her. She's unsuccessful, and eventually they find out that McKeith was stolen away by someone once again after leaving the prison. When everybody winds up together, the girls ask that McKeith be spared his life. And this is where it gets interesting. McKeith basically says, no, I'd like to die now because I feel like it's what I deserve, since these 4 new ladies, yes, 4, are saying I married them and got them pregnant. This is the point the parents are like, oh, well, okay, you can live. And they all rejoice and celebrate Polly and McKeith being married. The end. Keep in mind, we also have people singing and dancing a lot throughout the story. Yeah, it's a lot. And it's all a little absurd sounding when you really take it all in, but that's sort of what John Gay was going for. Special thanks to Super Summary for spelling out the plot in a way that makes sense. Super Summary claims that John Gay, quote, satirizes the political climate by making all of the characters in the Beggars Opera hypocrites. In doing so, he suggests that all those in politics got there not by their virtue or capability, but by hypocrisy, unquote. I definitely see why this show is so popular for a lot of reasons. First of all, we have music, singing, dancing, and for what it's worth, a pretty solid plot. A solid foundation for a good musical. Second of all, there comes a time when people get really tired of politics and just want to get away from it, or love to see it being made fun of. John Gay did this in a relatively indirect way, but still made his point pretty clear. I think this show might be more popular today than one might think. At the end of the day, the Beggars Opera truly acted as a springboard for musicals soon to come. Beyond the plot, John Gay's combination of popularized Italian opera songs with dance and a well-thought-out story could easily also be compared as a very early version of a jukebox musical like Mamma Mia. Jukebox musicals are musicals which use pre-existing songs by bands or artists. Mamma Mia essentially did the same thing as John Gay, as ABBA's music was put to the story of Sophie getting married and finding out who her dad is. It used songs people were familiar with, like Thank You for the Music and Dancing Queen, and changed some of the lyrics to make sense in the context of the show. So it's clear to see how the Beggars Opera still influences musicals today. Personally, I'm so glad John Gay created the Beggars Opera. I don't know what I would do without musical theater, and I would certainly be a lot less happy than I am now. Looks like the show's over. Our journey is almost up. Let's head through the stars, back to the future. That was such a fun journey through the stars. I hope you enjoyed learning about Dionysus, the god of theater, and the Beggars Opera. Now, you might be saying to yourself, yes, I get it. Dionysus and the Beggars Opera are both really cool and important to theater history. Everyone should know about them and their influence. But what do they have to do with each other? Well, they actually have a lot to do with each other. Theater might look so much different today without them. Without Dionysus, the god of theater, and festivals in his honor, would theater be taken as seriously as it is now, or might people call it a silly little hobby and take it for granted? I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty cool that theater has a Greek god associated with it. Without Dionysus and his influence, we might not have even had the Beggars Opera. Plays like the Bacchae, which deal with morality and the wrath of the gods, which include Dionysus, strived to have an impact on the people of ancient Greece, encouraging them to be respectful of the gods and what they stood for. This is pure speculation, so maybe we would have still had the Beggars Opera, but maybe it wouldn't have come until many years later. Maybe we still wouldn't have it. Regardless, both Dionysus and the Beggars Opera had one major thing in common. They brought people together. City Dionysia brought people together and allowed them to switch places, being accepted into society no matter who they are. Servant and master could switch places for a day and enjoy the festivities. The rich could enjoy them as well as the poor. It brought people together who might not have otherwise been brought together. The Beggars Opera brought in people who might have thought themselves to be more sophisticated, who enjoy your traditional Italian opera, but it also brought in, say, your average Joe. People who didn't necessarily have a lot of background knowledge of operas, but wanted to enjoy the music and a story they could understand, with themes and ideas they easily recognized. It was extremely successful, and people who liked all sorts of styles of music enjoyed it. It paved the way for modern musicals. If you're a fan of theater, musical theater, festivities, wine, or anything related to everything I've spoken about today, Dionysus and the Beggars Opera are two topics I hope you'll find very interesting moving forward. Whether you're studying theater, teaching it, or just enjoying it, I hope you've enjoyed joining me on this journey through the stars. In a time before the year 1800 to ancient Greece and London, diving into the backgrounds of Dionysus and the Beggars Opera. The Beggars Opera changed the course of theater history forever, and Dionysus, the god of theater, should 100% be taught to every theater history class. Come back soon for another journey through the stars. Until next time, this is Victoria with Voice of Adventure, signing off.